Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. We're going to get right to the show after these messages. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt, huh? Not quite Mysterious Goings On, listeners. You probably haven't got the brand new Mysterious Goings On official t-shirt. This is a quality cotton t-shirt coming in a premium unisex tee version and a women's slim fit tee version in all the sizes you could possibly need. These are great quality shirts coming in a variety of colors, including dark heather gray, black, charcoal, maroon. And on the women's t-shirt, we come in dark heather gray, black, charcoal, indigo, and midnight navy. There you go. Check them out. They are in the show notes. The link is right there. They're being sold on Bonfire. They're typically sold in batches, and they'll come at you pretty quickly. All the instructions are on the website. The link is in the show notes here or at mgopod.com. Again, show the world, well, at least show the world on Zoom, or show the world when we can finally really get out and about. Show the world that you have some mysterious goings-ons of your own by wearing our t-shirt, and help support this show. Thank you so much. You know, one of the exciting things about this show is talking to great authors, but I get even more excited about people who support great authors by growing great readers. That's why I'm really, really excited to talk to Jedlie Doherty here on the Mysterious Goings On podcast. Jedlie is one of the nation's most exciting school show performers. He's also host of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. There are so many things about Jed that I love. Writing great dimensions. He's a former licensed certified social worker, and he's been inspiring audiences as Jedlie since 1983. Since that time, he has brought a magical message of caring and community to millions of hearts throughout the U.S. and Puerto Rico. I mean, he's got a book, he's got all this stuff, and we're going to talk to him today because I want to get in right away to figure out, as the father of a 12-year-old, how do I get my kid to read more? Jedlie, welcome to Mysterious Goings On.
Oh, thanks. Thanks very much, Alex. I'm happy to be here. Glad to be reminded that I'm, closing in on 100 years old. Thank you for that. Always appreciate that.
Hey, brother, I'm not far behind you. Seriously. I've got a filter. Jedlie and I can see each other. We have the rapport, but I've got a filter, man. This is all just, it's taken at least 2 years off my life.
I'm telling you, I have a painting that's aging in the closet over there. It's,
You borrow it from Dorian Gray, I assume.
There you go.
I've used that joke myself a few times, but people just kind of cock their eye and go, okay. Huh? Like, then I say, you'll get this. And then I look at it and I say, you're not a big reader, are you? Jed, I want to hear a little bit though. You started a career in social work and all this. How did you get to be this guru? I mean, you're right up there with LeVar Burton in my eyes. I mean, how did you get to this point where your mission is to get kids to read?
Well, I certainly would argue that I'm up there with LeVar Burton. He's certainly one of my heroes, and he was actually a guest on the podcast, and he was pretty wonderful. I was telling you earlier that the podcast has given me an opportunity to talk to some of my heroes. He was one of those heroes, and it was an interesting way that it came about. My son, who is now 28, and I had some of the same frustrations that you're having with your 12-year-old when he was in middle school. He just texted me out of the blue, and he said, "You should have LeVar Burton on your show." And I said, yeah, I should charge $10,000 for a commercial on my podcast too, but I don't know if it's going to happen. But I thought, why not? So, about 20 minutes after he made that suggestion, I did some Googling, and I found a contact, and I reached out, and a day later, his wife wrote back to me and said, yeah, LeVar, I'd love to be on your show. And he was a wonderful, wonderful guest, and very gracious, and also just really insightful. And you could tell the passion that he has for reading and literacy. I think that's more what the passion is. It's not so much, I want you to read every day for 20 minutes. It's more passion of, I want you to be able to read so that you can make decisions on your own, so that you can be free. And that is something that was beautiful. How did I get here? It's as I look back, it's definitely been a twisty, turny kind of road. I guess if reading has always been something that I've been passionate about. I loved reading as a kid, and something happened to me in high school. I went from a really kind of progressive elementary public school where it was all, hey, what do you want to do? You want to make a movie? Go for it, man. Cool. And, whatever you want to do kind of thing. And I went from there to a very classical college prep Catholic Jesuit run high school. And so suddenly I went from this kind of hippy dippy environment to you have to learn Latin. And you have to do it now. And I mean, I had to learn how to write cursive in my sophomore year of high school. I had no idea. And so I really felt like a failure in that, I went from being a rock star to feeling like a failure. And at some point I started volunteering at that high school was in an inner city neighborhood. And I started volunteering at the nearby elementary school that was serving really needy, underserved inner city kids. And I loved it. And helping them learn how to read kind of helped me see myself in a different way. And it really turned my life around in my college experience. And that's what helped me decide that, I want to get into social work and I want to continue this kind of work. And I did that. And I was working with kids in the juvenile justice system in Massachusetts for about 8-10 years, I think. And I was doing what I was told. I was told I was doing a great job, but it was killing me. It was just eating me up inside. I wasn't able to leave it at the office. It was everything that is. I was bringing it all home with me, and and that was causing me to lead an unhealthy lifestyle. I put on tons of weight. I wasn't exercising. I was miserable, and I finally decided I can't do this anymore. But I didn't know what I was supposed to do. And so I prayed and I said, what do you want me to do? And I didn't get an answer right away, not verbally anyways, which is probably a good thing. But I sat down with the newspaper and I really couldn't focus on anything until I hit this one story, and it was telling me that Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus was in town and they were having auditions for clowns that afternoon. And I looked up to heaven and I said, you're kidding me, right? And I went to the audition and I did really well. And I knew being in Boston Garden in the center ring, where in this building where I had watched all my sports stars, Bill Russell and Bobby Orr, and all these great athletes perform, Bruno Sammartino for wrestling fans. And here I was in the center ring and I was making people laugh. It wasn't full. There weren't 20,000 people there, but there were a few hundred people there and I was making people laugh. And I knew that that's what I was supposed to do. And I didn't, the process for auditioning was like a year-long process, and they called me back down to New York and Hartford to audition a couple more times. While I was waiting for the decision, I started studying theater arts in Boston with different people. I went back to that school where I was tutoring kids when I was in high school, and I said, hey, can I do a show for you guys? I'm doing this thing. I think I'd like to get into clowning and performing and magic. And do you think I could do a show for your kids? And they said, sure. And then they started passing the word around. And pretty soon I developed this school show. And, so when the circus called me back again, I said, yeah, I'm all set. Thanks, guys. And then it went from there. And I've done that for over 30 years. And, it's been a beautiful thing.
I taking you back though to your career in social work, where it was just, well, I guess slowly killing you, as you said, because you see such horrors there. And a lot of that stems, now I'm a former newspaper editor and reporter. And so that was one of the reasons I kind of got out of newspaper. Too much, the crime and stuff breaks your heart. but just also seeing people you maybe wouldn't ordinarily see in your normal daily life, and how they're living, and how they're, a lot of them, in such marginalized situations. And I wonder, though, that the fact that it's a cycle, it's an endless cycle, it's kind of an Ouroboros of awful, because you get parents who don't read well, therefore you're already handicapped in society, and forgive that word, but I mean it in the sense of, you're already disadvantaged in society if you don't read well, and then you get into a low socioeconomic status because of that. In general, I'm generalizing, but then it becomes this endless cycle, and the kids don't break out of it. So I'm correct there, I assume, in a broad way, right?
You're absolutely right. A kid, doing the Reading with Your Kids podcast is put me in front of lots of different studies. There's one study that says that if you read to your kid 20 minutes a day, from the time that they're born, or 2 or 3 years old, until when they enter kindergarten, they will have heard close to 1 million more words than their peers who weren't read to. So your kid has a 1 million word advantage over that kid that you were speaking of, that coming from that home where the parents don't read or can't read, don't have access to books. And that gap only gets bigger, because it's not like, both kids get to kindergarten and the teacher says, okay, you came from the home where you were reading, so you just sit back and be quiet. We're going to work with this other kid in the meantime. In fact, probably the opposite is true.
Yeah.
Work more with that kid who can read, comes in reading, and the other kid kind of gets left by the wayside. Come on, try to catch up. Just don't make a lot of noise, and we'll kind of... I just interviewed Malcolm Mitchell, who was a former member of the New England Patriots. Right now, he is a reading advocate, literacy advocate. He was telling me he got to college and, big star athlete, and he finds himself in college as a freshman, and he's in a class, and the teacher asks somebody to read aloud, and he is terrified that somebody is going to ask him to read aloud, because he realized at that moment he couldn't read. He could identify words, but he wasn't a proficient reader. And he went back to his dorm that day, determined to learn how to read. And the way he did it was he went to the library and got children's books. And he started reading those children's books and built up his reading ability. And right now he runs a great charity called Read with Malcolm. And they're working hard to put books into the hands of underserved kids in inner city neighborhoods. And, he's recognizing that cycle that you were talking about and trying to break it.
Yeah. That's, we did read to our 12-year-old daughter. We did read to her. Another thing we did was we never really, and I'm not criticizing people who do, but we never really baby talked our child either. We just talked to her like a person. And she picked up vocabulary. Now I'm a writer and a public relations guy. Her mother is a public relations professional. So we've got decent vocabulary, and we didn't talk to her like, an adult, we weren't, but we talked to her in that level. And I think that helped too, just to build on what you're talking about. But the reading, it also, beyond the reading comprehension and the vocabulary building, it's a bonding, right? It's an emotional bonding. As a father, and I'm not trying to generalize or stereotype, but I have a daughter. She loves her dad. We're great, but she always kind of bonded more to her mom. And I think that's fairly normal. I think a lot of people will say flip a coin maybe, but that's how it went. But then when I started reading with her, and having her curl up in my lap, and we could turn the pages together and stuff, she started realizing, hey, Dad's all right too. So I just wanted to do, so there's a nurturing element as well, correct?
That's why I started the Reading with Your Kids podcast, because, in addition, the vocabulary, learning empathy, being able to put yourself in different situations and seeing your life through the eyes of the characters in the stories. Those things are wonderful. But when I pushed the button to start the Reading with Your Kids podcast, it was because I know with every fiber of my being that the reason I am close with my 25-year-old daughter and my 28-year-old son is because we spent hours and hours and hours reading together. It was an every night thing. And it was, reading the stories together and talking about the stories together. And that led to listening to music together, and what are they saying in this song, watching TV together, and what's going on in this show. That I think, is the best benefit of reading with your kids, is that bond that starts to build, that lifelong communication that starts when you pick up a book and say, yeah, what color is the ball that the dog's running after?
Well, okay, let's fast forward into the challenge though. So I read to my daughter. She liked the reading, but over the summer, especially during lockdown, we picked a book together to read together. But it was very tough, and I know a lot of it is competing with screens, and we let our, pardon the pun, we let our screens down about screens because of lockdown a little bit more than we should have. I know a lot of parents just had relied on, because we were both parents working out of the home. She had school on screens, but there wasn't near enough to fill up an entire day while we're working. And, we'd throw a book at her, figuratively, but it didn't always take. The screens are just more engaging for a lot of kids. Do you work with parents on that in any way, or do you have any advice at least for that?
Well, one of the biggest mistakes that I made with my son was he loved comics and graphic novels. And I would go and I would support that, and I would buy him comics and I would get him graphic novels. Anytime I went out on the road, I would hit a bookstore and bring home books for the kids. And I would pick, these weird Japanese anime things that you read it the different direction. And so I was okay with him reading, but I would go into the room every once in a while and just kind of throw my hands up in the air and say, would you please read a book that doesn't have pictures in it just once? And I didn't appreciate the fact that reading graphic novels is reading. I think a big key, I don't know your daughter. I don't know, the pandemic is hitting kids in different ways. If you can, graphic novels might be something that she's into, and,
good idea. Yeah.
if she's connected with the screen and she has that time with the screen, a graphic novel can be a way that's gives them the visual that they're used to by looking at a screen. But I think it also gives them something deeper, because they can set the pace for how quickly they go through the story. They still have to engage that imagination in their mind, because they are reading the text and it's just one still image, but the text, your imagination has to fill in some of the action. And so that might be a way. Maybe that's the key. I had an interesting experience at one of the last live events I had a chance to perform at, was Chicago Kid Expo. And I was there letting folks know about the podcast, and we had a bunch of books, and a beautiful family walked by, and a lot of little kids, and then a girl was about 12 or 13. And so little kids were looking at the picture books that were in the booth. And I turned to the young woman and I said, hey, so what kind of books do you like to read? She said, I hate to read. I said, really? Yeah, I like to do TikTok. And I said, okay, but do me a favor. And I had this silly little book. It's called The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus. And there's a lot of Hebrew words in it, and kind of, really kind of punny kind of book. I said, just read this, see if you can pronounce some of those words. And she started reading it aloud. And it's one of those, to say the Tyrannosaurus is kind of fun. It feels kind of fun in your mouth. And she was reading this, and this smile went over her face, and it was like, hey, this is fun. And I'm not going to tell you that, I heard that she went home and suddenly is reading, 3 books a night. I don't know. But I know for at least that moment, she was able to experience reading as a fun activity. I would say, see if there's a way for you to help your daughter discover a book that she has fun reading. And maybe that can reignite the passion that she used to have for reading. Or maybe that there's a book that you two can still read together aloud.
That's a great idea, Jed. I love that idea. And I will employ those, I'm going to say tactics, but they are tactics, parents. I think we all can agree. But let me talk about now. you're Jed Doherty, but you have a character, Jedlie, you know, and I've listened to your podcast and energy, my gosh, the energy level. I don't know how you do that all the time. I mean, but then that's an aspect of being a performer, I understand. But who is the character that the kids are presented with, and how does that work?
Oh, wow. I guess my daughter, she was a performer as a kid, and she had a unique high school and college education that allowed her to come out on the road with me a lot. And so she would oftentimes come out on the road for 3 or 4 weeks at a time and perform with me. And she's the person who has seen me perform more than anybody else in the world. And she survived to this day, and she seems to be in good mental health despite that. But she said that my character on stage is me cranked up to about 100. So, you know, it's just my personality. I just magnified it. And I think the reason I think I made that choice is when I was learning how to perform, I wasn't an actor, and I didn't have the skills to kind of take on another character and be somebody else. All I knew how to be was me, but I didn't know how to magnify it. I didn't know how to crank it up. I was an athlete, so I knew how to be out in the field and yeah, we're gonna go, we're gonna grrr. And so that's just kind of what I did.
Do you find there's a certain aspect of your performances that kids seem to gravitate towards the most? Is there some special thing? I'm just trying to paint a picture for folks who haven't seen you. What's that look like?
It's funny. Different audiences respond to different things. I think one of the things that the kids love the most is, and it's the thing that gets me in trouble, the spontaneity. There's really no script in my show. There's an outline, but every show is a little bit different, mostly because I have kids up on stage with me and there's no telling what they're going to say. I remember one of the tours that my daughter was with me on, we host international kids in our home, and we had a young student from Italy with us. And so she actually was with us for 3 weeks. And towards the end of the 3 weeks, she jumped into the van after a show and she looked at me and she said, I don't understand it. Every day it's a different show. You get up and you do something new. I never know what you're going to do. And so...
Sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
And, you know, and it's fun for me. And kids love me talking about my kids and my family. You know, they love me being silly, you know, just kind of, you're just kind of silly and kind of outrageous. Nothing that gets, you know, is that a school finds objectionable or whatnot, but just a lot of fun.
Well, let's talk a little bit then about is it pronounced, is it Maritini?
The Great Maritini, yes.
What's that all about?
That started as a skit on stage. My daughter was in the 3rd grade at the time. She was with me. I was invited to perform for a group of college kids. It was an alumni meeting of a church youth group. The priest invited me because he actually thought it was going to be a goof. This is our 8th anniversary. What do you do for an 8-year-old's birthday? Oh, you invite a clown in. So let's bring this guy in. The college kids won't dig it, but it'll be fun. And maybe the clown will feel uncomfortable. And the opposite happened. We got up on stage and the kids, I was killing it. And there was one point when we had this college guy up on stage with me, and I just started riffing. And to the point where my daughter was on stage and she's like doing a stage whisper, Poppy, what are you doing? This ain't in the show. And I go, trust me. The Holy Spirit is taking over here. We're going places, not sure where, but just, and that story just kind of took place there. It was the retelling of the story of the Good Samaritan. In my retelling, the Good Samaritan is this aspiring and clumsy magician named Sam who called himself the Great Maritini, and he would travel around and in the story, the kids find out that, you know, Sam, he he tried really hard. He failed a lot. He tried to pull a rabbit out of a hat and ended up pulling a hat out of a rabbit, and like that. But he never gave up on himself. He always believed in himself. But it was on one journey from one town to another, because the Great Maritini, he lived hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. He had to walk from town to town. And while he was walking from town to town, he encountered somebody who had been beaten and robbed. And it was at that moment that he discovered that the greatest transformation of all is being able to transform feelings of caring into action to help another human being. So, that story started out, in that moment of inspiration in that church basement for those church kids. I remember the priest coming up to me afterwards saying, "I didn't know you had a gospel magic show." And I said, "Father, I didn't know I had a gospel magic show either." And then a few years later, one of the authors who I had on my show, Jeffrey McSkimming from Australia, the author of Cairo Jim and the Phyllis Wong Adventures. I was just chatting with him and I said, "Hey, I have this story I've been telling on stage." And he just encouraged me. He said, "Look, you don't have to go out and find a traditional publisher or an agent and go through all that. You can take your words and massage it and find an illustrator and publish it on Kindle. It doesn't take anything. And if people love it, they love it. And if they don't love it, you didn't lose anything." And, so I did that. And, it hasn't become an Amazon bestseller, mostly because I give away the digital copy for the most part. But it's a wonderful part of my show. It's one of my favorite parts of the show. And it's a book that a lot of people have found a lot of joy in. And so that's gratifying.
I see that you've got a bilingual edition with a free magic kit.
There is, yes. If folks order through my website, we have this giant bilingual edition physical book, and it's in English and Spanish. And that we have a Jedlie Spectacular Magic Kit. Folks can get a free one of those when they buy the book.
That's fantastic. Let's talk a little bit more about the podcast now. I assume it's available wherever podcasts are sold, so to speak.
It is available where places that I haven't even heard of yet.
Right.
I'm sure you get the same. I get an email. "Hey, Joe's podcasting platform just picked you up. Great. Where's Joe's podcasting platform?" We're on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple, iHeart. We were nominated for the iHeart Radio Best Kids and Family Podcast Award. We're on this thing, the Spotify of India, called Ghana. I think I'm pronouncing it right. We have a lot of listeners from India. We're on the China's Spotify called Himalaya. I think they pronounce it differently, but yeah, I'm just amazed. First, you had to apply to get on the iHeart platform, and that was kind of a thrill when I was accepted onto that. And then suddenly it's like this one, that one. It's crazy.
If let's take it. A lot of course, obviously, a lot of our listeners are regular listeners, are writers and authors. If they're a children's book author, how do they go about trying to get their book in front of you for consideration to be read on the show? How's that work?
They can go to my website, readingwithyourkids.com. We have a very handy dandy authors click here tab at the top of the page, and they can just scroll down and find our Be a Guest tab. And that tells them, about the podcast, how, a little bit about our process, and then gives them a link to either contact us directly or go to our scheduling page. I think we're going to take out the go to the scheduling page and just let them contact us, because we're getting bombarded. Interest in being on the show is enormous.
Yeah, that's a nice problem to have. Is there, what's the cutoff, I guess? What ages of writers, what are you looking at?
Here's the thing, going back to you and your daughter, there are studies that show that there's this, we think of reading with your kids with something you do on the couch, snuggled up with your little one. But there are so many benefits reading and also co-reading with your middle school kids, with your high school kids. Kids love to be read aloud. We all love story. If you listen to audiobooks, even adults love hearing stories. Right. One of the benefits of reading with your with your middle school kids is that you're able to comprehend audibly on a higher level than you're able to read. So if your seventh grader is reading on a seventh grade level, they can comprehend a book that was written for a sophomore in high school, typically, or a junior in high school. Co-reading a book together is a wonderful thing to do, where your daughter is reading a book and you're reading it at the same time, and then instead of putting on the radio as you're going to dance class or school, you talk about the book, or you talk about the book over dinner, and you're continuing that conversation that you had reading Dr. Seuss when you were 5 and 6 years old, but now you're talking about it, with a book that's a little more sophisticated.
And that's what we were trying to do, as I mentioned earlier. I'd read a chapter, and then she'd read the same chapter. Then at dinner, we'd talk about it. It just got to a point where I couldn't get her to finish the book. But I think she hid the book from me. But maybe that's about the book more than me. I don't know. But I'll tell you what, though, this is great. All right. So it's readingwithyourkids.com. And again, you can find the podcast everywhere. So I recommend everybody does that. Jed, any final words of wisdom here before we venture into the great beyond?
Words of wisdom. I have never been accused of being able to offer words of wisdom. I just, one of the things that I end my show with all the time, and this is for all the parents out there, you've been heroes. You've been rock stars. This pandemic has put a stress on families that's I don't think has ever been experienced before. You've come through this. You went from living a normal life and then hearing that next week you're going to be your kid's teacher, and you're going to be your kid's best friend because they can't play with each other, and you're going to be doing all this stuff together. And you got through it. You didn't think you could do it back in March of 2020, but you did it. So thank you. Hats off to you. I want to ask you to please continue to read with your kids, because believe it or not, you are making the world a better place every time you read with your kids.
This is so great. Just as a personal aside, I was a very early reader. I read at a pretty high level. It was I think that's one gift I got. I did get that. And without going into my childhood, reading was not only a pleasurable pastime, it was an escape for a lot of things. And I think it's one of the greatest things in my life is the ability to read, which led to me being a writer and led to me having a facility with words in my career. So I just want to encourage all our listeners, if you think it's time to give up on reading with your kids, I think you need to listen to this show for encouragement. I think you need to. I'm hearing this from you, Jed. I want to make sure I'm hearing it right. You're just saying keep going, because it is hard right now. But when I think back to little boy me, and I think about my little girl here who's got all the things I didn't have, but she's still got her own challenges. I got to remember that. And I think a great way to create a bond or to maintain that bond is through reading. So I do so very much, Jed, appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy that I had a chance to meet you.
Yeah, back at you. All right, folks. We'll have everything you need to get a hold of Jed or to contact his podcast and subscribe in the show notes. Again, thank you to Jedlie Doherty.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Mysterious Goings On. Don't forget, we have a complete archive of all of our interviews, monologues, updates, live readings, dead readings. All of that stuff is available at mgopod.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual suspects. Please join us there. Again, don't forget, mgopod.com also has links where to find me on social media and how to get in touch in case you want to be a guest here on the show. Well, I think it's time that I move on for this week, but until next time, keep reading.